This segment of the news has been brought to you by Sun Oil Limited.
Welcome back. Former Minister of Education Jeffrey Lloyd says that it is clear that this government does not have a plan for face-to-face learning at our schools, even though they claim that they did while in opposition. He says this much today during the Free National Movement's press conference on the COVID-19 crisis.
The Free National Movement is genuinely concerned about the decision by the Progressive Liberal Party government to delay the return of in-person learning for Bahamian school students by the imposition of a blanket virtual learning mandate across the public and private school system. The continued absence of students away from the classroom, the thousands who have not benefited sufficiently from the virtual learning experience, has exacted a seriously detrimental effect on the educational and social advancement of Bahamian students. It was the opposition in 2020 who claimed that they had the plan for the safe reopening of in-person learning. Obviously, they do not.
Mr. Lloyd noted during his time as minister, the ministry published a strategic plan for the safe reopening of schools for 2020, which covers policies for face-to-face, hybrid, and remote and online learning models.
Which covered not only the present COVID situation, but included all circumstances where school attendance may be disrupted, such as with a hurricane or other natural disasters. It was the calculated decision of the ministry at that time that Bahamian students could continue in almost all circumstances under one of three modalities. I said so in the House of Assembly in July of 2020 when I stated, quote, "The Ministry and Department of Education, after rigorous consultation with international and local education stakeholders and public health officials, have conceived and designed the best strategies for the reopening of schools."
Schools were set to reopen next week. However, due to the rise in COVID-19 cases, health officials and education officials made the decision to delay the reopening by 2 weeks. Minister of Education, Technical and Vocational Training Glenys Hannah Martin firing back at the comments made by former Education Minister Jeffrey Lloyd. In a video press release, Minister Hannah Martin says that the former minister left behind a crisis and she has tried to resist commenting on his lackluster performance under the previous administration, but now she is compelled to respond.
He must be aware that by now I know the facts. The former minister must remember that as he advocates for children to resume face-to-face learning when the Ministry of Health and Wellness advises otherwise, during his term in office, he made the decision to keep public school children in a fully virtual mode when there was no such public health prohibition. And at that time, all other schools in the country went into a hybrid model, which he is now advocating for. He also knows that no active steps were taken or real focus brought to bear to track down and help the thousands of children who were plummeting through the cracks because they have never attended school in almost 2 years. In fact, he has hardly, if ever, spoken of those children.
Minister Hannah Martin also addressed the ongoing school repairs.
The inaction of school repairs nationwide was a level of political delinquency that is perhaps unprecedented. The former minister knows full well he left behind a crisis and a debacle, and he should instead be heard to say that he will join hands with all stakeholders to ensure that children are given the best opportunity possible to develop their potential. This is the time for heroes, not hypocrites. I ask all Bahamians to join with us as we do all that we can in the best interests of our children.
She noted that the ministry has appointed a task force to focus on the identification and implementation of education recovery of public school students. Nurses from abroad and healthcare professionals from the public health services are being sought to assist with public healthcare facilities where there is a significant staff shortage. Health and Wellness Minister Dr. Michael Darville says the government is looking to bring in additional nurses as more than 130 healthcare professionals are out of the system here in New Providence and on Grand Bahama. As it stands, a little over 100 healthcare professionals are out of the system on New Providence and about 30 at the Rand Memorial Hospital on Grand Bahama.
We are now seeking to bring in an additional 50 nurses from abroad to assist us in our fight against COVID. We are working across the board to bring individuals out in healthcare professionals from public health to ensure that our core hospitals are functioning and functioning adequately so that if there is an additional surge, we'll be able to cope.
The Bahamas is in a challenging fourth wave of the pandemic, according to Dr. Darville. He says the government is doing all it can in the midst of this fourth wave.
At our last press conference from the Ministry of Health, we outlined our plans. One of the plans was to bring additional doctors into the hospital system. That is being done as we speak. The other plan was to increase the amount of nurses in the system because of the exposure and the effectivity of the COVID-19. A lot of nurses can go in possible quarantine or isolation. We're really talking about free testing, the implementation of our pilot free testing here in New Providence, which should begin today at vaccination sites where individuals can have access. Because if you were looking around New Providence during the holiday, you would see some of the sites were packed, particularly the ones that were open. And so we need to create more opportunities and places where individuals could be tested, and in our case, free of charge.
With record numbers of COVID cases being confirmed by health officials over the last few days due to the easily transmissible Omicron variant of COVID-19, Dr. Darville says that after the New Year holiday, health officials are watching the amount of cases that will come as a result of gatherings that were held that could have possibly been super spreaders.
We're watching the amount of cases, and we have been doing an excessive amount of testing. What is concerning us is the percentage of testing is proving to be higher than we anticipate, which is an indication that the disease burden is relatively high in the country. And we are now preparing ourselves to ensure that we have adequate healthcare protocols in place so that if there is a surge that possibly could take place with hospital admissions, we are in a better position to deal with it.
Meantime, a number of illegal migrants have been apprehended in Bahamian waters in recent days, one group subsequently charged with illegal landing. Bahamas immigration officials say 66 Haitian migrants were interdicted near Anguilla Key on New Year's Eve. According to reports, on Friday, December 31st, the department's enforcement unit on Grand Bahama received the 44 males, 15 females, and 7 minor Haitian migrants from the United States Coast Guard cutter Bernard C. Weber at Lucayan Harbor, Freeport. The group was originally sighted by SEG cutter Charles Sexton aboard a vessel near Anguilla Key, surrounding the southeast extremity of Sal Bank. There, the group was interdicted and later handed over to SEG cutter Bernard C. Weber in Freeport. All migrants were tested for COVID-19 and those results were negative. They appeared in the magistrate's court charged with illegal landing and subsequently transported to the Carmichael Road Detention Center where they await deportation. This apprehension preceded a similar one on Eleuthera on Monday, January 3rd, when 36 Haitian nationals were arrested in the area of Windermere Island after the vessel they were on ran aground. Meantime, on Sunday, January 2nd, 11 Cuban migrants and 1 Haitian migrant were apprehended by the Royal Bahamas Police Force and subsequently turned over to immigration officials at Chub Key to be processed. The group was apprehended after they were sighted disembarking an unknown vessel. A search of the area was conducted and the group was later found at Fraser's Hog Key in the Berry Islands. All migrants were assessed by the local emergency medical personnel and were reportedly in good health. Upon interview, the group claimed that they had been on a boat excursion from Nassau, New Providence, when they were informed by the captain to disembark as the vessel had experienced problems. Initial investigations revealed that the department had documentation for the Haitian national. Additionally, all Cuban nationals were visitors who overstayed their authorized stay in the country. The group was transported to New Providence on January 3rd for further processing and to be charged with overstaying. Local attorneys for a man accused of housebreaking and rape back in the 1980s making an announcement on a significant ruling for their client. A ruling by the Supreme Court that could win 60-year-old Eric Stubbs his freedom and have a major impact on the sentence of other individuals that require an order by the Governor General to have an appeal application approved. Argerino Saunders has more on this story.
There has been significant progress in the case of 60-year-old Eric Stubbs, accused of a 1984 rape and housebreaking in Lyford Key, where he was found guilty and sentenced to 7 years. He appealed the sentence and was subsequently found guilty by reason of mental illness made worse by drug abuse. He was then sent to Sandilands to serve out his 7-year sentence, or so he thought. 39 years later, Mr. Stubbs remained in maximum security at Sandilands after his attorneys were told the appeals court nor the Supreme Court had the authority to hear his latest appeal application and that only an order of the Governor General could secure his appeal. On Tuesday, Attorney Sonia Timothy revealed an application to the Privy Council to have Mr. Stubbs' appeal heard by the local Supreme Courts was successful.
Application was then made to the Privy Council, and on the 15th of December 2021, on an agreement by the parties, the appeal was allowed to the extent specified on the ground raised in relation to the separation of powers, that the appellant be detained until discharged by order of the Supreme Court. The matter should be remitted to the Supreme Court, and the question of the appellant's potential release should be considered by a judge of the Supreme Court, and no later than 3 months from this order.
Attorney Timothy explained the Privy Council has asked for specific actions to be taken by the Supreme Court in its determination as to whether Mr. Stubbs should be released or not. Based on requirements, Mrs. Timothy is confident that Mr. Stubbs is of sound mind and rehabilitated and will be released in a matter of time.
A direction hearing was heard before Senior Justice Bernard Turner on the 22nd of December 2021, and the matter has been adjourned to the 21st of January 2022 for presentation of the psychiatric reports. This appeal and the decision of the Privy Council not only impacts Eric Stubbs, but others who are in a similar position as he is, who have been detained at Her Majesty's pleasure, who have been detained at the Governor General's pleasure.
There has been much talk about the true separation of powers, and Attorney Timothy, who relied on a ruling from a similar appeals case in Jamaica 2003, says this latest ruling by the Privy Council could have major implications for others who are in the same situation as Mr. Stubbs.
At page 4 of that decision, stated that the nature and effect of a sentence of detention during Her Majesty's or the Governor General's pleasure or the Queen's pleasure has been widely considered and found to constitute a sentence determinable by the executive. Any sentence which leaves to the executive power to determine the sentence offends the separation of powers principle. Sentencing is a quintessentially judicial function. If a mandatory sentence of indeterminable detention is to be imposed, it must be for the court, not the executive, to determine its length.
Mrs. Timothy and a group of attorneys are encouraging Parliament to amend Section 192 of the Criminal Procedure Code and take another step closer to true separation of powers. Chirino Saunders for JCN News.
Well, that does it for news this evening. Once again, I'm Tyler Simonet, and from all of us here at JCN News, have a good evening, everyone.
This segment of the news has been brought to you by Sun Oil Limited.